this happen now to our evening news. Got to go back to Huntley, Brinkley, and many of us do, to what evening news has become. And now with the Fox News and CNN and all the other news channels, what's your impression of where they're taking us?
Yeah, I think it's a complicated question. On the one hand, you could argue that it's great that there's so much news out there now, and there's so many sources of news, and thinking about that in a positive way, it gives everyone a chance to be a reporter, an editor on their own Facebook and social media, to do their own analysis and commentary, and that could be a good thing. On the other side, of course, you have people who have pretty much taken over the airwaves and cable to use their programs and their voices to basically become political messages and to reinforce the political views of their audience, both on the left and the right. So you could argue that the value of reporting and real objective journalism has been hijacked by those people in a way that's not good for our democracy or for our country. I see both sides of that argument, by the way. I love that my nephew, who's 26, can be his own reporter and get on Facebook and make some really great points. I hate that the far right has exploited social media for fake news and then calls the left fake news, and nobody really knows what to believe anymore. So people always ask me what would my dad think about it all. And I know that he would mostly miss the in-depth reporting, the documentary that he and Merlin did, the forum that used to be a staple on the networks, in-depth, real reporting. There's not enough of that. He did some really terrific programs, including with Judge Lee, about using the Socratic method in his series, Media and Society series that he did through Columbia University. My dad was mostly a teacher. I think if he were around today, he'd find a way, he'd probably invent, I talk about this in the book, some way for either through social media, probably, because that's really the medium now. That's the medium for expression and communication and journalism that's kind of taken over. I mean, there's still the nightly news programs on CBS, NBC, and ABC, but they don't have nearly the impact or the import. If you want to get news, you can get it all day long on various outlets. So I think what's needed and what he would be doing now, if he were alive, would be coming up with more programs like he did with you, where he'd get brilliant judges, Court of Appeals, justices around the country debating the issues of the day with journalists and politicians, and in an honest dialogue and discussion. But yeah.
How do you measure social news and television news?
So that's a good point. I mean, I think that older people, this is my opinion, are pretty entrenched in their views. I know that Facebook, has billions of people who subscribe to it and who use it every day. So, and Twitter and all the rest, look at what the president does with it. It's unfortunate that he does, but you can't deny the import.
It's amplified over television.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That's true. It's amplified to you on the channel you like to watch, whatever that is, and to me on CNN or whatever I like to watch, and to the guys at Fox News, they spin it the way they want to spin it to their viewers. We used to have a house in Palm Desert, and everybody down there was watching Fox News, and I just couldn't take it anymore. We sold our house. I honestly, I couldn't. I go in the gym, the bar, the diner, but it's that's the way it is. So it does come from his Twitter account. So you can't deny the power of social media. And, you know, we need another Ed Murrow we need another Walter Cronkite. I don't know where that person is. I hope they show up. I think they will.
Carl Bernstein was here last week, and in his talk he says, get the facts. Don't color the facts. Just get the facts. He said that's what his career is about, but he was very disturbed about what you see, the biases on all sides.
I love Carl Bernstein. I watch him on CNN all the time. He was on Bill Maher Friday night. He's so smart. You know, and he said the job of journalism is to get the most obtainable version of the facts accurately. And that's always been the role of journalism. And that's why the founders envisioned the fourth estate of journalism, which is now television and social media now, as equal parts of the government, really, and vital to our democracy. So when you have a president who says that if the press is the enemy of the people, I don't want to get political. I don't want to get.
You can, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your dad did those big panel discussion things. Are they available anywhere today?
Yes, Judge Lee has been on many of them. You can still find them. We were talking about this at lunch.
Some are on YouTube. But there's also the Fred Friendly seminars. Where
Yes.
you get the entire set.
That's right. If you go to, you can Google Fred Friendly seminars, Media and Society seminars, Columbia University, and they were great because they would force you to think.
Oh, yeah.
Dad had a line that Lee quotes all the time. Yeah, he would get a Mike Wallace, or he'd get a judge like Lee, a federal appeals court judge or a district judge, and then he'd get a politician. And guys like Mike Wallace, who were the ones who usually put other people on the spot and made them sweat, Dad and the guys who hosted this would make Mike Wallace sweat because they'd back him into these moral dilemmas that couldn't easily be answered.
Hey, give me the quote, Andy.
The quote was, well, why don't you do it? My dad used to say, my job is to make the agony of decision making so difficult that you can only escape by thinking. And that's what he did. So if he were around, he'd be doing that kind of stuff and an honest dialogue, because there are no easy answers.
He did the one on the talk shows. Geraldo Rivera.
I ended up exec producing a show with Geraldo. I brought him back to CNBC when I was running it, along with Tom Snyder and Tim Russert and Charles Grodin, Phil Donahue, a bunch of people. And, you know, he did a serious program for us, and he kind of reclaimed his journalistic career. He started out as a serious journalist covering Willowbrook and the abuses of that state hospital, and he was very smart. Studied journalism under my dad at Columbia, but then he kind of went off the tracks and did all the the daytime stuff. But he came back and got it going again. By the way, Tim Russert, to me, I was lucky enough to executive produce his show on CNBC, his show about the media, not Meet the Press. But to me, his loss was just a terrible loss for journalism, because I think he came as close to anyone to Murrow and Cronkite. If he had been alive today, I think he might have been that voice. Just my opinion.
Andy, there's a question from a fellow who played baseball at USC.
Yes, right on.
Edward R. Murrow had falling outs with Blackwood and Shire, and then I heard with your dad that at some point, did they get together again before Murrow died?
You know, I don't know about that, to be honest with you. I never heard anything about that. I know my dad adored and idolized Ed Murrow and was heartbroken when he passed away at the young age of 55 from smoking 3 packs of Camels a day. It started as radio, I can hear it now in the record albums, and then it was I can see it now. Then CBS Reports.
Yeah, William Pauly decided that Edward Murrow shouldn't be involved as much, and your dad took over producing and running the whole
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, my dad was heartbroken by that, but it was interesting. After the program I described about Murrow, the Radulovich and McCarthy programs, as I mentioned in answer to Dick's question, the world of television news changed. Where in the earliest days, Paley was very proud and pretty much let them do whatever they wanted and encouraged them to. The pressures of Wall Street and finance began to take over running a major corporation like CBS. And ultimately, you couldn't do the documentaries. See It Now was canceled, then CBS Reports was moved to Sunday afternoon where no one was watching. Used to be in prime time. Murrow and my dad were very disheartened by that. Paley, in my dad's book, Due to Circumstances Beyond Our Control, which if you're interested you should read. It's a great book. It's written 3 or 4. Another one, Minnesota Rag, that Lee had today at lunch. He said, I love you guys, but I can't take the stomach aches every week with your controversial programs. And he was feeling the heat from stockholders, and the business changed. And now it is what it is. It is a business. It's a business. It used to be something else. I think CBS News is still a great news organization, and I think that Leslie Moonves, who runs CBS, is very proud of it, but it's not like it was in those early days. I don't think it ever will be again.
Andy, our videographer has a question about Johnny Carson.
Could you comment on the early practice that happened at NBC where when Johnny Carson was on the network, they would copy over the film reels after it was broadcast? And this is a tragedy for our culture. A decade of his programs lost. When he found out about it, he was upset.
Yeah, no, that is shocking and true, and it's true of a lot of programs. They just wanted the tape stock back so they could record other programs, and
That's why there's no coverage of the Super Bowl one. Both networks televise Super Bowl one. There's none. Anything you see in Super Bowl one is NFL films.
wow.
They degaussed those big
2-inch reels.
Yeah, they needed it for something else. Some engineer said, "Oh, this is 3 years old. Let's just use it for something else."
Tape was expensive.
Sad.
Yeah, it was expensive, but these programs were invaluable and priceless. It's shocking. And eventually Johnny, as you say, started, once he owned his own show, he kept everything. And salt mines somewhere in Utah underground, and his nephew, Jeff Sotzing, who's a friend of mine, preserves them now, and almost like they're Picassos and religious artifacts, and they're precious. And I write about it in the book, trying to preserve the old Tomorrow shows. We did 1,500 shows with Tom Snyder, everyone from Alfred Hitchcock and Orson Welles to John Lennon and 4 U.S. presidents and NBC. Yeah, we had everybody. And those tapes are rotting away, and we're in warehouses on 2-inch and 1-inch video. And we've gotten about 150 of the best ones digitized, so they're forever preserved in museums, but we're trying to get them all done and find a home for them.
Stories about Tom Snyder?
Oh, God. There are tons of them in the book. Tom was a great, colorful character. I just want to finish your question. One, I didn't mean to, and then I'll get back to that, but I was thinking about it. It really broke Murrow's heart that the network changed so much and that he wasn't able to do the reporting. And he left in about 1960 to go run the USIA, U.S. Information Service, and he was broken by that. It was really very difficult. And my dad and he, just so I give you a fully honest answer, because you made me think about that, my dad still adored him, but my dad did stay on and keep working at CBS on the theory, stay with it and they did a lot of great programs. That's when he started working with Cronkite and people like that. But it was a sad chapter in the history of CBS and Murrow and my dad. And I know my dad felt very bad about it. And then Ed got sick, and it was a sad end to a great hero, a great man. Snyder, I mean, I don't know where I could start, but I literally have hundreds to new Tom. I'll give you just my first impression. I grew up out here going to film school at USC, Fight On, and we would watch a bunch of kids watching the news in the dorms on the community television, because this guy was so dynamic. He'd come out with the leisure suit and the 4 colors there. He'd be smoking a butt on the news. And he could just grab you through the lens, Tom Snyder. He was a great communicator, and he was like really just born to do television. And I graduated from film school at SC, went back to work at Channel 4. And a couple years later, I was a young writer, started as a researcher, and then they let me write the weather and the sports on the weekends at night. And then the news was sort of in free fall, the ratings were bad. Snyder was anchoring out here at Channel 4, and it was through the roof, the #1 program in the United States, news program. And that's why they gave him the Tomorrow Show, because he was so good. And the NBC execs wanted to take NBC past the Tonight Show, after which it signed off. The network signed off. You guys may remember. Johnny would end his show, and the network put up the American flag and played the national anthem, and didn't come back on the air till 6 in the morning with the Today Show or the local news, which is hard to imagine, as you know. But that's the way it was. So Pat Weaver and some of the great NBC execs said, let's program beyond, let's go 1 hour. What are we going to do? We don't want to spend a lot of money. Let's hire a smart anchor guy and let him interview people. No band, no writers, just very inexpensive. So it came up with this show, The Tomorrow Show, and they hired Tom to do it. And he did a great job, went on to win Emmys. And when I was back in New York working on the news, they brought him back to anchor the news in New York because they wanted to recreate the ratings they had in LA, in New York, the #1 market. So they hired him, big campaign, buses, subway, everywhere you looked in New York, it was just Tom Snyder. And there was this great anticipation. And I'll never forget the day he walked in the newsroom, 7th floor at 30 Rock at NBC, and we were all waiting for this messiah, this guy to come in. And I had seen, watching him in college, and I would say, this is going to be cool. And he walks in, you'll appreciate this. He comes in, NBC News, as Dick knows, very hallowed, sacred ground of television, and John Chancellor and Huntley Brinkley, very serious atmosphere, no horsing around. Snyder, who's completely irreverent and just like defied all of that, comes walking in. We're all waiting. It's a Monday. See who is this guy who's taking over the news. Around 3 o'clock, he's going on the air at 5 or whatever. I hear this loud voice in the newsroom, and this guy's like 6'4". He's wearing these plaid golf pants and a bright pink Bel Air Country Club shirt, smoking a butt. He's got 5 colors of hair. And he yells out, all right, everybody, I'm here. Now get back to work. Show's over. I'll see you on the news. Goodbye. So that was him. And it just went on forever. Anyway, there's tons of Snyder stories and pictures in there, like the Cagney one. When I broke my wrist, on the way back, maybe he was my boss. He was 10 years old. I thought maybe he'd want to stop it by a doctor. Let's just get back to the city, but let's get a vodka first, and it'll make you feel better. So we stop in some local bar in upstate New York, and these guys, he's in there just cracking jokes for about 2 hours. Meantime, my arm is going back. Then on the Tomorrow Show for like a year, he told the story, and he always ended it with, Andy had to get on the horse. Andy had to get on the horse. Ha 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 ha. With a famous laugh. Ha ha ha.
Yes, sir.
On the Entertainment Tonight, because you were the first producer of ET,
Yeah.
right? Am I correct? Was ET the first of the entertainment shows that were day and date because they could satellite deliver?
Yes, that is absolutely true. We were the first ones to do that.
Didn't you guys buy satellite dishes for your
Yes, we
affiliates
did.
because they didn't have
A lot of the stations didn't have Earth stations to receive the satellite feeds. Hard to believe. But we ended up buying them for them. A bunch of stations. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, what do you think about the FCC ruling that happened a couple weeks ago that Sinclair Broadcasting bought out Tribune and several other to the tune of 200 news stations across the country?
Well, I'm not an expert on that, but I find it ironic that Trump is against the AT&T merger with because of CNN with Time Warner, but he's in favor of that, or not Trump per se, but the Trump administration. I got to be careful because I'm going to get into politics, and I'm really not an expert on that, but I do see the irony of it.
Back to 3 network. It's coming back to a very few amount of people
no
owning
question.
the news, basically.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not healthy for 2 or 3 companies to own every media. That's not the way to do it, sir. Snyder interviewed him for an hour, and Snyder, in my remembrance of him, and talking about why he was such a good interviewer, I recalled what he asked Alfred Hitchcock. And this was just a classic Snyder line and a classic Hitchcock answer, I thought too. But he said, "Mr. Hitchcock, what scares you? What frightens you?" And he said, "Policemen." That's my only thing. Do you have a Hitchcock story?
Oh, no, my sister went on the Queen Mary. My sister and mother went on the Queen Mary. My sister was taking over the role of Laurie in Oklahoma in London. And on the same ship were the Hitchcocks and their daughter, Pat. Patricia Hitchcock, their only child. She was in all the films, and she was a wonderful actress. She looked kind of like him, and the mother looked like him too. So I mean, she was adorable. You can picture her. And anyway, they went on to become great friends. My sister and Patricia, and then we went to her wedding at the Regency Hotel in New York, and she moved out here. And I have to tell you something, and maybe you didn't know this, but the parents never gave her a dime. She didn't have any money, and she was the only child. But when they both died, which was in a period pretty short, she got everything. She owns every Hitchcock movie. Isn't that's
it's a happy ending.
She has a happy ending. and they have 3 daughters. She had 3 daughters with her husband. And so I love that story, that she finally... And she adored them. She adored them, but that was their thing. They were not going to give her anything that she didn't deserve, they felt. And a lot of people do that with their children. I don't. But anyway, she ended up with all those incredible movies. She owns them all. Isn't that great? I love that.
Yes, sir.
I watch all the old TV shows back in the 60s and early 70s. Why don't they bring back variety shows like Dean Martin specials? Or why don't they bring back like Gunsmoke? And
There's more TV being made now than ever before, and I don't watch that much of it because I'm so sort of consumed by what's going on in the news that I find myself watching a lot of news. I love those shows, Gunsmoke. Pat did all the Dean Martin shows. There's a whole thing in the book with her, with Dean. You can see some of the pictures. But I love variety shows. I think, in a way, Saturday Night Live is a variety show. I watched it last night. It was great. There's some good stuff. This Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Fallon, those are variety shows. There are some attempts to do Westerns from time to time. I thought Deadwood was great. This is my opinion. Westworld, is it on HBO or whatever? That was out this year. Yeah, I didn't watch it, but I heard it was good. Won some Emmys. So I don't know. I think we all tend to like the shows we grew up with, but the kids now love a lot of these new shows. So I think it's, every generation has their favorite. Sir.
Andy, I have a question about the great Vin Scully, especially since you and I emailed each other about listening to Vinny when we were in the 7th grade on little transistor radio. You talk about the great Vin Scully.
Oh, with pleasure. Vin was nice enough to write a little blurb for my book. And in my marriage to Pat 32 years ago, one of the great gifts I was given was a friendship with Vin and Sandra, his wife. Pat and her ex-husband, Ed Hookstraden, who was a great agent, who was Vin's agent and lawyer, had a great friendship, and I inherited that. And Vin's just one of the great people I know in the world, aside from being one of the great sportscasters of all time, along with Mr. Enberg here. So, I have a little chapter in here called 3 Legends, and one of those is Vin. One is Dan Rather, who I got to work with, and one is Muhammad Ali, who I got to work with. But in my little chapter on Vin, there are a lot of very short chapters in the book. It's only a few pages. I call him the man who says yes. And that's because everything, I don't like asking celebrities or pretty much anybody to help me do anything. But over the years, I've asked Vin to do several things involved with my charities and boards that I'm on. The LA Free Clinic, now the Saban Free Clinic, teaching my class at USC Film School. Last year, the Shoah Foundation, Steven Spielberg's Holocaust Video Testimony Foundation that I'm on the board of counselors on. Every time I ever asked Vin to do anything like that, to appear, to lend his name, he says yes. And I can tell you that is very rare in our town for someone of his stature. I know Dick is the same way, to show up, not just lend their name, but drive an hour and a half in traffic, an hour and a half home, show up and do it. Aside from that, give their money and their name and their time. And that's the real Vin Scully. And Pat and I, I'm lucky enough to see him a couple times a year and have dinner with him and listen to the stories, which are so fantastic, which he told my class. And he's the great storyteller of all times. And it's just all real. And the thing I love about him, and I know Dick did the same thing, he was asked many times at an HRTS luncheon I produced for him, the Hollywood Radio Television Society, another thing he did for me, what makes a good broadcaster, a good sports broadcaster? And I know Dick's the same way. And it's shut up and get out of the way when something great is happening. Don't try to talk over it all the time, and don't try to, upstage it. And that's what Vin was always great at when we were kids listening to him. I was a Yankee fan, but grew up listening to the Dodgers, and I was a Giant and Yankee fan, but I listened to Vin calling the Dodger games. And he was at 19, 20 years old. I mean, the man did it for 67 years. Can you imagine? And you were right up there too. So it's just, these are the giants, these are the legends, the Enbergs and the Scullys, that we were so lucky. You absolutely do, Dick. And, we're just lucky to have been able to listen to them and to love them. So,
there was a good opportunity for you there with your relationship. I'm stunned by the fact that Vin won't sit down. I mean, he has so much in him that should be preserved forever. I mean, we can go back and listen to all of his broadcasts, and I would love, I would like to be the person, sit down with him and just turn on a camera and let him talk and kind of feed him and react to it, and we have some commonality there. But he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to write a book.
He's so modest. And
it's just, there's so much beauty in there. And,
so much.
Anyone who loves the game of baseball, which I do, if I can, I want to take your, I just recently talked
Please.
And this is Scully. I mean, he right away comes up with a story I'd never heard before. And he says, Jackie Robinson. And really not Jackie the way I said it, but Jackie Robinson. He said there was a game early in Jackie Robinson's career, was a play at the end of the game where he's out, and everyone, he said, this is Vin, everyone knows he's out. I mean, the fans know he's out, the umpires know he's out, but Jackie thought he was safe. So Jackie comes into the clubhouse, and he's mad, and he's yelling and screaming, he's throwing his spikes into the locker and raising Cane, and the whole clubhouse is just quiet here. And the Dodgers at that time had another African-American right-handed pitcher, Dan Bankhead. He said, and in Scully's word, he was kind of the Uncle Remus of the clubhouse. They didn't say much, but when he talked, everyone was eager to listen. So as Jackie's racing Cane, Scully continues, Bankhead rises slowly on the other side of the clubhouse and says, Robinson, you're wrong. You're loud wrong. And Vin said, he always used that as a lesson, that he knew he'd be wrong, not very often, but he didn't want to be loud.
Oh, yeah.
That's great. I love it. Fantastic.
No one like him. He's the poet laureate of all sportscasters, and I wish he were still working.
Well, you were and are right up there with him. So thank you again, Dennis, so much. Thank you all for coming out. This has been Joe. Thank you. This is awesome. Do we get to have this now?